He didn't just build a hotel, he built a machine for murder. In 1893, H. Holmes invited the world to Chicago, and then he trapped them. Imagine standing in the shadow of a masterpiece, a building so complex, so labyrinthine that only one man understood its true purpose. To the public, it was a marvel of modern hospitality, rising from the smoke and ambition of a booming industrial city. But behind the brick and mortar, behind the charming smile of the man at the front desk, lay a blueprint designed for one thing: suffering. This wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't a momentary lapse of sanity. It was an architectural project, a corporate strategy of death, executed with the precision of a CEO and the cold heart of a monster. How does a man turn a building into a weapon? And more importantly, how did he get away with it while the entire world was watching? Welcome to Chicago, 1893, the World's Fair, the White City. It was a time of unprecedented optimism. Electricity was lighting up the night for the first time. Inventors were showcasing the future, and millions of people flocked to the Midwest, desperate to be part of history. They came with their savings, their dreams, and their trust. They were looking for a bed, a meal, and a new start. And waiting for them, just a few miles from the fairgrounds, was Dr. Henry Howard Holmes. To look at him, you'd see nothing but success. He was handsome, articulate, and undeniably charming. A doctor, a pharmacist, a businessman. He was the embodiment of the American dream, a self-made man who had pulled himself up by his bootstraps. When he spoke, people listened. When he offered a room in his massive new hotel on 63rd and Wallace, young women and wealthy travelers didn't just accept, they felt lucky. But Holmes was wearing a mask so perfect, so seamless, that even his closest associates couldn't see the rot underneath. He understood something fundamental about human nature. We trust authority, we trust success, and we never suspect that the person shaking our hand is calculating exactly how much we're worth, dead. The construction of his hotel, later dubbed the Murder Castle, was a masterclass in deception. Holmes knew that if anyone saw the full blueprints, they would run to the police. No normal architect designed hallways that lead to nowhere. No hotelier needs soundproof vaults in the basement or chutes large enough to slide a human body from the upper floors to the cellar. So he improvised a strategy that was as brilliant as it was vile. He hired a crew, let them work for a few weeks, and then fired them all, refusing to pay them, claiming their work was substandard. Then he'd hire a new crew to continue the work where the previous one left off. It was genius. The plumbers didn't know what the carpenters were doing. The bricklayers never met the gas fitters. Nobody saw the whole picture. Only Holmes held the master key. He fragmented the knowledge, compartmentalizing the construction so that he was the only one who knew that the gas pipes in the guest rooms weren't for lighting, they were for asphyxiation. Once the castle was complete, the trap was set. Guests would check in, dazzled by the scale of the place. The ground floor was a bustling pharmacy and retail space, a facade of legitimate commerce. But the upper floors, that was Holmes' domain. Imagine walking down a hallway, turning a corner, and finding yourself facing a solid brick wall. Imagine opening a door, expecting a bedroom, only to find a steep drop into darkness. The architecture itself was designed to disorient, to confuse, to isolate. It was a physical manifestation of Holmes' mind, twisted, illogical, and dangerous. He preyed on the vulnerable, young women moving to the big city for the first time, wealthy widows, employees he had seduced with promises of marriage and fortune. They would enter his world and slowly the walls would close in. It wasn't just about murder, it was about control. Holmes could control the gas flow to specific rooms from his office. He could lock doors from the outside. He could watch. He turned his guests into rats in a maze, toying with them before the end. And the terrifying part, the city outside was bustling. The streets were full. Life was happening just on the other side of the wall, while inside, people were vanishing into thin air. For months, the disappearances were a whisper. A maid who didn't show up for work, a guest who checked out early without saying goodbye. But Holmes was an expert at administrative magic. He forged letters, faked departures, and used his charisma to deflect any suspicion. "She went back east," he'd say with a sad smile. "She found a husband," and people believed him. Why wouldn't they? He was generating income from every angle. He sold the skeletons of his victims to medical schools, a gruesome final transaction. He claimed their assets. He was running a factory of death, and business was booming. But arrogance is a blinding light. Holmes began to believe he was untouchable. He believed he had outsmarted the world. The castle was his fortress, and he was the king. But the thing about building a life on lies is that eventually the foundation cracks. It wasn't the murders that brought him down. It wasn't the weeping families or the missing persons reports. It was greed, pure, simple corporate greed. After the World's Fair ended, the flow of victims slowed. Money got tight. Holmes turned to insurance fraud, a game he had played before. He hatched a plan with his associate, Benjamin Peitzel, to fake Peitzel's death and split the payout. But Holmes had no intention of splitting anything. He murdered Peitzel, and then, in a move that revealed the true depths of his depravity, he took Peitzel's children. This was the turning point. This was where the cool, calculated architect began to unravel. He dragged those children across the country and one by one silenced them. But he was sloppy. He was desperate. And for the first time, a determined insurance investigator was on his tail, tracking the paper trail of a dead man who was supposed to be alive. The investigation led them back to Chicago, back to the castle on 63rd and Wallace. When the police finally entered the building, they weren't prepared for what they found. They expected fraud. They found a slaughterhouse. They found the gas jets, the greased chutes, the soundproof rooms with scratch marks on the walls. In the basement, they found a kiln large enough to incinerate a body and pits of quicklime and acid. The layout of the house made no sense to them. It was a chaotic jumble of dead ends and secret passages. But as they pieced it together, the horror dawned on them. This wasn't just a building, it was a weapon. The press went into a frenzy. They dubbed it the Murder Castle. The handsome doctor was unveiled as a monster. The sheer scale of his crimes captivated and terrified the nation. Holmes confessed to 27 murders, though some estimates run much higher. He basked in the attention, selling his story to the newspapers, claiming he was born with the devil in him. "I could not help the fact that I was a murderer," he wrote. "No more than the poet can help the inspiration to sing." He tried to spin the narrative until the very end, playing the main character in his own dark drama. But the law is a cold reality. H. Holmes was sentenced to death. On May 7, 1896, the trapdoor opened. But even in death, he didn't die instantly. His neck didn't snap. He strangled for 15 minutes, twitching at the end of a rope. A slow, agonizing end for a man who had inflicted so much pain. The murder castle mysteriously burned to the ground shortly after his capture. Perhaps an act of vigilante justice, or perhaps one final secret meant to be kept buried. Today, a post office stands on the site. People walk over that ground every day, picking up mail, running errands, completely unaware that beneath their feet lies the foundation of America's first true house of horrors. Why does H. Holmes still haunt us? Why do we retell this story a century later? It's not just the gore, it's the betrayal. It's the realization that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a charming gentleman. Sometimes it looks like a visionary architect. Holmes proved that intelligence and madness are not mutually exclusive. They can be partners. He showed us that safety is an illusion. We walk into buildings, we sign leases, we trust the structures around us. But Holmes reminds us that every building has a designer, and sometimes that designer has a plan that has nothing to do with your comfort and everything to do with your end. Because in the end, H. Holmes didn't just build a castle. He built a legacy of fear that has never quite crumbled. And as you walk down a long, unfamiliar hotel hallway late at night and the lights flicker, you have to ask yourself, do you know who built this place? And do you know if they want you to leave?